This is If My Bible Reading, Part 42, which is in Genesis 17, and we'll start on verse 11. Um, verse 10 says this. It says, "This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you must be circumcised." Do we use that today? First of all, it's a good, healthy thing to do, but do you have to be circumcised when you read the New Covenant and you listen to what Paul says? Paul is a lawyer, and so he sounds a bit complicated. But you got to read his stuff over and over again to understand it. You do not have to be circumcised at this point. Yeshua came, established his new covenant, and his new covenant is stricter. We're going to be telling you this over and over again. His new covenant is stricter. His new covenant has more Torah in it than the old covenant. The exact opposite of what the institutionalized pastors are telling you. You have a covenant of circumcision of the heart when you give your heart to the Father through the Son. That's harder to do than just getting circumcised physically. And plus, women have a circumcision of the heart. So they're both responsible for each other. And for generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old, now 8 days happens to do with vitamin K. So this was a walking of the Torah out in these days. This is what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to hear and obey it. And as I'm telling you, it was easier to do these things in the old covenant, follow the old Torah, in which they couldn't do, than it is for us today to follow the new Torah, which is 1,050 commands. And when we get to that, you'll see what I'm talking about. They make perfect sense in the new covenant, but still we don't and we cannot obey 100% of the 1,050 commands, because if we fail in one, we failed. We cannot put our faith in walking Torah out. You can't walk in Torah. You can try, but you cannot guarantee it. There's no guarantee. All right. So then we skip down to something very important. Verse 14, "Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Today you may know that many believers who are not circumcised physically." Again, this Torah command still exists. But because of the death of the resurrection of Yeshua, that circumcision is now fulfilled to both men and women. They give their life, they hear and obey the 1,050 commands given by Yeshua from the New Testament, the New Covenant. They have a circumcised heart, which is the greater new Torah. Okay? There's where it's introduced in the Old Covenant, right here. And at this point, Abraham falls down. He laughs to himself. Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarai bear a child at the age of 90? Now, his wife laughed about it. Now he's laughing about it. His wife paid a price on other things, and she passed before he did. And Abraham said to Elohim, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." Well, today, in the last 5 or 6 years, institutionalized church leaders have invented a new word called Chrislam, Christian Islam. They married them together, and they're trying to make it fit, trying to shove it down the church's throats nationwide. And you can do this yourself. You can see how many Christian churches are failing, falling apart, totally destroyed, and who's moving into them. As the majority of Islam in the United States is moving into churches. It's a slap in the face. They can build their own meeting places, but they don't. They're moving into the churches and changing the names plates out, taking down the cross and putting up a sickle and a half moon. Islam. And they're doing that on purpose. This Chrislam is the biggest nonsense, and the Christian pastors have fallen for that. Shame on them. Once again, shame on them for what they're doing. But here the Father says that he will bless that nation. And we're in verse 18, 19, 20 now. My covenant with him is an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. And he will be the father of 12 rulers. And I will make him into a great nation. The Father says, I will make him into a great nation. That's one. The nations of the scattered tribes of Israel are multiple nations. But here it says, I will make them into one nation. Now, what's going on with all the strife across the world today? In the Middle East, it's spread all over. They represent Islam. They represent a nation of Islam, and they call themselves that. Listen to them when they're up there preaching and cursing and going after Yeshua. And they say, we are the nation, and they're not saying nations. They're saying we're the nation of Islam. There's the promise made. So is the Father going to allow the nation of Islam to go after the scattered tribes? Well, if the scattered tribes don't hear and obey, absolutely yes. How do we know that? How do you say that, Bruce? Where is it? Prove that in the Bible. Everywhere. Every single time an incident occurs, and the Father even uses other nations like Babylon, like Egypt, like the Assyrians, to come in and scatter his people because they do not hear and obey. So absolutely, without a doubt, wherever you open up the page of the Bible, yes, Father uses other peoples to get what he wants done. Because as I said this, and we'll say it all the way to the end of Revelation 22, I'll say this. Do you pray to the Father more when things are going fantastic or when things are going bad? Are you on your knees talking to the Father more when you're down and out and you desperately need help? The answer to that is almost always yes. Well, if the Father knows this and he wants to talk to you every day and hear from you every day, and he knows that you talk to him when you're really down and out, will he allow you to be pummeled by pagans and heathens and hateful people in order for him to have a decent conversation with you on a daily basis? Yes. It's right. It's right there. All right. It says, verse 21, we're still in chapter 17, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you this time next year. So there's the promise, and it's coming. As much as Ishmael's lineage will be blessed, the promise of the covenant went to Isaac and the 12 tribes nonetheless. Promise made is a promise kept. Chapter 18. Yahweh appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. All of a sudden in chapter 18, it just goes from all these blessings and curses and all this stuff, and all of a sudden, bam, he's sitting under a tree at the entrance, and it was a hot day. So chapters 18 and 19 is kind of interesting. Like, what's this being stuck in here? Kind of like a break in the book. When you're reading the books, like, and meanwhile, on the other side of the ranch, Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. Now, we're taught when we were in Sunday school that there were angels in the world. Angels have wings, they fly around, they fly around, and they have big wings, and, they're super dudes. Here they look like people. And the answer is, do messengers look like people? Yeah. Do messengers eat food? Yeah. Do they eat normal food? Yeah. Did Yeshua, when he came back from the dead, rose from the dead, was with his Father, came back before he rose on his ascension at the very end? Was he eating meat, eating fish, doing things, drinking water, drinking wine? Yeah, yeah, he was. So where are we getting this wing stuff at? That most angels, or all angels, have wings. Some angels have wings, but not many. Some different kinds of messengers have wings. So they come there, and there's three of them. But they just said they're men. That's all it said so far. So far. And he said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Yahweh. Do not pass my servant by. Now he says, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Yahweh. How does he know that? How does Abraham know all this? Let a little water be brought. May I wash your feet and rest under this tree? And let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed. Told his wife to get 3 measures of fine flour, knead it, and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herds, and by the way, it was leavened bread. And then he went to the herd, got a tender calf, so we're going to eat some steaks tonight. Then he brought some curds and milk, so there's some milk. He's mixing the milk and the meat. Orthodox Jews say, oh, we don't do that. Right there it is, folks, Old Testament. So we see and comment that we see that these men are messengers. One indeed is Yeshua. And they ate bread and meat. We rarely see this in the entire Bible. We do find later that Yeshua is able to transform as he did on the Mount of Transfiguration. This may help to understand the angels, the messengers, can eat food, not just manna from heaven. I remember told that for years in Bible school. Angels eat manna. You're eating food from heaven. Remember all that, you guys my age, older? The stories that these Bible school teachers told you. Once again, Sarah laughed about everything. Verse 17, then Yahweh said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? One of the many references in comment that this Yahweh was Adonai Yeshua. No one has ever seen the Father, nor ever will, but they ate and spoke with this Yahweh, Elohim, Yeshua. Once again, this is where we say, when you read what as we're presenting it, up until you get to the New Covenant, Yeshua is in everything a lot more than the 18 months. Well, wait a minute, Bruce. Wait a minute. Yeshua was 30 years old, and then he walked the earth for 3 years, and then he was crucified at 33. No. And in 33 A.D. No. Yeshua was born on about 4 or 5 BCE, and then a couple of years later, King Herod died. You look at the time that Yeshua was born by looking at when King Herod died. So King Herod died before 0 or 1 A.D. Anno Dominio, the year of the Lord. They said Anno Dominio is year 0 or 1 A.D. That's not the year of the Lord. And who made that up? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It's not true. You look at the stars, the Mazareth, once again, we can do a complete course on that. The stars and the planets and Virgo and everything to do with a description, looking in the heavens, simply looking in the heavens and seeing that something of birth was going right through the bosom of Virgo, the Virgin, and coming out of her right hand later on was up to boots, which means woman with child. That's what that's all about. And so when you look at the 4 Gospels, there was only 3 Gospels that came out, and John was written much later, so the 4 Gospels. But John, the book of John, was not finished until all the other disciples were either dead or gone. Then John finished his. We have Yaakov comes in there, which would be the half-brother of, or James, the half-brother of Yeshua. His actually came out first, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get into that. Just stay with me on it. But when you take a look at these 4 Gospels, some of them are synoptic, they fit together, and you look at all the events that occurred you realize that he was on this earth and ministered for 18 months, a year and a half. Okay? Not 3 years. But just let you know that right now. Later on, you'll see it. We'll get back with you.